Hey, all on church, Pastor Ed Newton coming from our main campus here in San Antonio, Texas. Or wherever you're watching or listening from, know it's our great honor to have you a part of the journey. We're in a series called Resolution, a Life in Focus. And today we talk about facing failure. Two principles I need you to grab hold of. That is, number one, your failure is not final and your failure is not fatal. So lean into what God has in store for us as we embrace forgiveness and a God of second chances. Until we meet again, much love. We've been in a series called Resolution, that is a life in focus. You being the best version of you. Don't prove yourself, fill in the blanks here. Be yourself. Let's try that again. That phrase. Don't prove yourself, be yourself. Be all that God's called you to be. And so as we begin to journey in that direction, that is, the scene changes. We look to the future version of us, our dreams and our goals and aspirations obtained and to fit in every box. The bookshelf behind me is a picture of the future version of us. The current us is still working this out. It may feel very disjointed. It may feel very scattered, tossed about. Tremendous discord. The wagon is our goals and our dreams and aspirations. There's a long distance, it feels like, from here to here, but I just want to speak this over us today. That Jesus, yes, loves you, but it's not once you get your life together. He not only loves you, he actually likes you too, but it's not when you get your junk together, achieve all your goals and dreams and aspirations. He loves you in the messy. He loves you right here and right now. He just loves you way too much to let you stay here. And these principles that we've been building on, power of 1%, self-awareness, irresistible influence, today facing failure, and so that we can be all that Christ has called us to be. So if you got a listener guide and you got a Bible, Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16, and while you're turning there, let me see if I could give this illustration to serve as the diving board into the conversation today in the deep water of what God's calling us to. But there's a story about a college football coach that looked at his recruiter and said, there's a type of player that we're looking for. And I'll draw your attention to this particular punching bag. He said, we're looking for that player that gets knocked down but gets back up. And the recruiter said this. He said, I know exactly the player that you're looking for. And the coach said it this way. He said, I'm not looking for that player that gets knocked down and gets back up and then gets knocked down and stays down. And the recruiter said, Coach, I know exactly what you're looking for. He said, we're looking for that player, Coach, that gets knocked down and gets back up and gets knocked down and gets back up and gets knocked down and gets back up. That's the player we're looking for, Coach. And Coach said, no, sir, we're not looking for that player either. He said, then who are you looking for? He said, we're looking for that player that knocks everybody down. That's the guy we're looking for. But can I say this to you? That failure for all of us is what is knocking us down, but we're not defined by our failure. We're defined more by choosing not to get up from our failure. And I want to speak a message today of how we are called to face failure. Here's our target statement today. It's not if you will fall, it's when you fall, it's how quick you get up that counts. Now notice this, life is going to toss you about, but there's something that's got to be in you that stabilizes you and causes you to have an anchor in the midst of the storm that allows you, no matter how life tosses you, you'll be able to bounce back. You won't be able to see it, but it's going to be so deep down inside of you. And I say this unequivocally, unashamedly, it's the power of the Holy Spirit of God in you that anchors you, stabilizes you. And when life tries to throw you, you may fall, but you'll get back up again. We're going to talk about that today. Point number one, write this down. I want you to notice, according to this verse, that a righteous man, any fellas in the house today? Or listen, come on, fellas. Any fellas in the house today? Sound like a group of gorillas, and I love it. A righteous man and a righteous woman. Any ladies in the house today? Come on, ladies. It's obvious that we're outnumbered today. And some of you fellas were like, and that's a good thing. But a righteous man or a righteous woman falls down 7 times, but rises again. It begins with point number 1, our value before failure. Notice the word righteous in your notes is highlighted. That is, righteous man or woman falls. We're highlighting the word righteous. Letter A, write this down. Your standing, here's what Jesus says about you. You have been declared righteous. Declared righteous. What does that mean to be declared righteous? Romans 8:1 says this: there is no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. No condemnation. Romans 8:30 says you have been chosen and you've been justified, declared righteous. Jesus speaks that over you. You're declared righteous, not only declared righteous, but write this down. It's not only your standing, it's your significance. You are defended as righteous. You go, Ed, so you're telling me I have a defense attorney? Yes, you do. His name's Jesus. He stands in your defense. You go, why does he have to stand in my defense? You know why? Because the opposite of the word advocate is the word adversary. We have an accuser. 1 Peter 5:8 says the enemy roams around like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Revelation 12:11 says the enemy accuses us day and night. But I love what verse 11 would say is that the enemy has been conquered by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. Jesus is your defense attorney. And so we understand this. 1 John 2:1 would say this to us, that we have an advocate in Jesus Christ, the righteous one. But not only are we declared righteous, defended as righteous, we are destined as righteous. It is 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You may not feel holy because you've made some mistakes, but Jesus sees you as holy. God has accepted you as holy, not because of anything that you and I have ever done. Religion doesn't make you holy. Jesus makes you holy. And when you give your life to Jesus, he changes your standing, your significance, and your status. Come on, can we clap our hands to that today? I need us to clap to that because we got to believe that. I love what John Maxwell would say. John Maxwell said this: your attitude more than your aptitude will determine your altitude. How high you will rise is your attitude over your aptitude determines your altitude. Let me see if I can illustrate it this way. There's a story about a little league baseball player who's playing baseball in the backyard by himself. He got his ball bat and the ball, and all of a sudden he throws the ball up in the air, and while he threw the ball in the air, he says, I'm the greatest hitter that's ever lived. Strike one. He grabbed that ball again and threw it up in the air, and he says, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. Strike two. He begins to examine the bat as if there's something wrong with the bat, and all of a sudden at that moment, he said, as he threw this ball in the air, he says, I'm the greatest baseball player, the greatest hitter that's ever walked across this earth. Strike three. All of a sudden, he laid down the bat, picked up the ball, and he says, I'm the greatest pitcher in the entire world. It's attitude. Attitude changes everything. The reason why we had to start with point number 1, and I'm hoping you're digging what I'm saying today. Our view has to begin, our value leading to our view has to help us understand something, that God and his words about us change everything. And so point number 2, it's our view. It's our value that determines our view. Our view towards failure. For the righteous falls. The righteous falls. Now, when we understand our value, that is, we're all going to make mistakes. Every single one of us in this room make mistakes. Matter of fact, I made a massive mistake on Friday. Can I tell you about it? Thank you for saying yes. On Friday, I had the day off and I was going to spend some time in the lawn. I don't know how your house is working right now, that is in regards to your yard, front yard, backyard, but weeds have completely taken over our yard. It's that season in which we're getting ready for spring, and so while the grass is dead, all the weeds are green, and I just wanted to declare an all-out assault on the yard at that particular moment. I got my stuff together, went to Home Depot. I scored the most premier parking spot you could ever get at Home Depot. I'm talking about handicapped spot next to it, spot 1, row 1, right at the door. I'm like, God, you're good. You're so good. I got a couple of things on my list to get some gutter type items, to get some weed prevention chemicals, and then to get weed and feed for the lawn. I don't know how in the world that weed and feed, one bag could cost $40, but there is a premium on that stuff right now. Hello. So I needed 5 bags. That's a lot of weed and feed, all right? So that reaction you just had is the same reaction I had when I saw the price tag and how much I needed to do our yard. So all of a sudden I load this up in the shopping cart, check out, paid a whole lot more than I probably should have paid. But I found myself moving towards the direction of my vehicle, which of that premier parking spot allowed me to know it's just a short distance. I'm thankful. My cart was overflowing, 5 bags of weed and feed. Bag number 1, put it into the trunk. Bag number 2, all of a sudden snagged a little bit. And let me just pause for a second because some of you know exactly what's about to happen. Some of us in the room, speaking to the male nation right now, all the fellas in the house, option 1, all of a sudden the bag snags. Option 1, we reorganize and reconsider what's taking place. But 99.9% of us in this room, fellas, when there's a snag or a little bit of resistance, we just pull harder. That's what we do. And when I did, it gashed that bag. And then I discover, because I did not have the privilege of seeing on the inside until the gash took place, that the weed and feed is neon pink. Pink fertilizer. Now spills all over the concrete. I'm standing in a pink puddle of fertilizer. I now put all the other bags. I take this rip bag, of which 1/3 of the bag is now on the ground, and I'm just doing some mathematics at this moment. I'm like, that's about $15 on the ground right now. Come on, that's real talk. 11:45. I don't know how it works in your house, but I'm like, I got to do something about that. Option 1, drive off. Option 2, I got to find a way to get this home. I immediately think to myself, I need a broom and I need a dustpan, but I did not buy one of those. So I get a plan together. I go back into the front lobby space of Home Depot. I get the coupons right there at the door. I get just those little magazine leaflets, and I grab several of those. I grab that recyclable, that is plastic bag that they give at the refund center. I grab one of those, and I go out into the parking lot. I'm row 1, spot 1, in front of God and everybody. I'm just scooping up that pink fertilizer, making that pile, scooping that up, putting into that plastic bag, going, I'm gonna get my $15. Bless God, I'm gonna get it. But before all that happened, I'm down in the pink puddle of fertilizer, ball cap on, and all of a sudden, this sweet mom goes by me, and her son in the shopping cart, and this is what I love about kids, they speak with no filter. And her son said so loud so I could hear it, that man made a big mess. Now, I'm now in service 4, by the way. And if this is you, ma'am, if this is you, I'm just assuming that based upon what she said to her son, she had to be a CBCer. But she didn't know it was me. But if this is you and you saw a man on his knees in pink fertilizer, and if this is you, ma'am, I will jump down off this stage and I will hug you, because what you said was like a Hallmark card in my heart that day. You said this to your son, but you're really saying it to me. Mistakes happen to the best of us. Mistakes happen to the best of us. If you're in the room right now, listen, I've been looking for you for 4 services to tell you, I am blown away. Here's the reason why. Because what you were saying without saying it, you were speaking to your son, but you wanted to encourage me, because I just put my ball cap down a little bit lower and I'm scooping this up going, I needed to hear that, because you know what? Mistakes like that, why did I feel so low? You know why? Because I was embarrassed. But isn't it interesting how when we make mistakes and we have faults and failures, we know we're gonna make mistakes, but the embarrassment keeps us down until somebody looks at you and goes, mistakes happen to the best of us. Here's what you need to hear today. If you don't want to make any mistakes, here's the answer. Then don't do anything. But I know you well enough, 1145 service, that's not how you're gonna live. You wanna change the world. And if you wanna change the world and make a difference and leave a fat dent on the planet for the glory of Jesus, you're gonna make some mistakes, and that doesn't define us. What defines us is whether or not we get up again. That's what defines us. Come on, can we clap our hands to that today? That's what defines us. So write down a couple things if you don't mind. The fact of failure is not avoidable. Could we agree with that today? Failure is not avoidable. The fear of failure is not final. Psychology today would say that many of our children are wrestling with what's called an epidemic. They've called it an epidemic, and the epidemic is we're watching our kids not commit to something because of the fear of failure. They won't commit unless they are guaranteed that they're going to succeed. But if we live that way, then we commit to nothing, because very rarely do we find in life that the first thing that we give our life to is instant success. The reason why success tastes so sweet sometimes is because of the struggle and the striving. But many of us, I'm guilty today, helicopter parent, lawnmower parent, whatever you want to call it, I've tried to prevent at times from my kids having to struggle like I did. And we sweep in or we try to remove the obstacles. But in reality, the reason why we turned out the way that we turned out, not absent from some faults and failures, but the reason why we turned out the way that we turned out is because we had to go through the struggle. But if we remove the struggle, then our kids won't turn out to be the way that we want them to turn out because we removed the struggle. It doesn't mean you let them. It just means you come alongside of them. And oftentimes we got to let them learn because, as Benjamin Franklin said, the things that hurt are the things that instruct. And we learn a lot in the valley, more so than what we learn on the mountaintop. Wolfgang Puck said it this way. For many of us, we love what he's been producing, obviously, culinary arts. But for many of us, we go, okay, what did Wolfgang Puck said? He said, I learned more about my one restaurant that failed than all my restaurants that were successful. He learned one in failure more than success would ever teach him. So we have to understand that failure is not final. What's the filter of failure? How do we filter failure? Failure is not a percentage, it's a process. Failure is not a percentage, it's a process. Oftentimes we have been raised in regards to the academic realms that we sit in and strived in, that failure is a percentage. Percentage is not failure. It's the process of failure teaches us that every road to success, oh, could you hear this today, 1145? Every road to success is built on the road map of failure, the stepping stones of failure. So we have to understand that failure is not avoidable. It's not avoidable. That you and I are going to have moments where we fail. It's not final. And failure is not a percentage, it's a process. Point number 3, write this down. Not only do we see the value before failure, our view towards failure, but also it's our vision through failure. For the righteous man falls down 7 times. Now, as we understand this, one of the things that you need to know, there's a big difference between saying that I failed and I'm a failure. Big difference. I failed versus I am a failure. Now, when we hear this, we have to understand, Charles Noble said it this way, you must have long-range goals to keep you from being frustrated by short-term failures. That what you're going after is greater than the setback. I'm just telling you today, somebody in this room needs to hear that your setbacks are setups for something greater. But you got to rise up, and you cannot stay down, because the balance or the ballast and the anchor in you that's not seen to everybody else, when life throws at you something, you bounce back because that anchor that tells you, because the Spirit of God that's in you, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is alive and well in you right now. And that power and the Holy Spirit raised Jesus from the dead, which gives hope to all of us in this room. You shall rise again. But you got to have a different attitude about failure. You have to have a different mindset about mistakes. So when we think through this, we got to look in the mirror. So I gave you just a simple acrostic. Write this down. Mistakes lead to maturity. Mistakes lead to maturity. When somebody walks up to me and says, I need some advice, you know what my first response is? I say it every time. I can tell you what not to do. But in reality, when somebody's asking for advice, isn't that what they're asking for? Tell me how not to make a mistake. So I can tell you what not to do, but how can I tell you what not to do? Is because I've learned from my mistakes and it leads to maturity. How about this one? Incapability is not your identity. Incapability is not your identity. John Sinclair said it this way. What a brave, bold statement this is. He said, failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. That is, the incapability of you being able to deliver in that moment is not your identity. There's a big difference between saying that I failed and you are a failure. You're not a failure. God says to you, you are not a failure. Your failure is not final and your failure is not fatal. You shall rise again. I'm just speaking this into your life today. It's not your identity. It's not your identity. Failure, as one man said, is an event, not a person. It's an event, not a person. Resistance produces rationality. Resistance produces rationality. I love what Benjamin Franklin said. This is a strong word. He said, or actually Albert Einstein, he says, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. It's in the problem that we discover a new solution. Henry Ford, great automobile maker, said it this way: failure is the simple opportunity to begin again, but this time more intelligently. So we have to have a different attitude towards our mistakes and our missteps. But notice this: rejection inspires resiliency. Mistakes lead to maturity. Incapability is not your identity. Resistance produces rationality. Rejection inspires resiliency. One of the greatest long-distance swimmers, her name Florence May Chadwick. She had a goal to swim from the Catalina Islands to the mainland of California. By the way, that would be over 25 miles. 15 hours of swimming. Nobody could help her. Nobody could coach her. She had to do this on her own, swimming in the fog for 15 hours. When she gave up, got in the boat, her mom said to her, which was her coach, said, "You were half a mile from the shore." She said this out loud. Florence Chadwick said this: "If I could have only seen the shore, I would have began to dig deeper." Here's what I want to say to you. Oftentimes, we feel like giving up because we can't see the shore. And the fog gets so thick. And the fog can be, I'm embarrassed, or I'm trying a new adventure and I'm wondering what everybody says. But if you're like me, you're your own worst enemy and you get knocked down because of your own self-doubt, and you hold yourself down because of what you think everybody's thinking about you, that they're not thinking about you, but you're playing this tape in your mind that they've said this about you. But somewhere in the midst of this, some skinny white dude jumps up on a stage today and says to you, rejection inspires resiliency. Rise up, brother and sister. Don't you stay down, but get back up. Get back up. See, obstacles give opportunity. I would dare to say that all of us in our home, for the most part, have what's called WD-40 in our home. It's this one apparatus that we use, in essence, this one invention that we use for all things. Do you know, like we use WD-40 at times to get gum out of carpet, but that's not why it was designed. It's been said that WD-40 can shine shoes better than any shoe polish. I mean, there's all these life hacks that come from WD-40, but do you know what WD-40 stands for? WD stands for water displacement. The number 40 is because it failed 39 times. It was built, that is, WD-40 was built to prevent rust corrosion on the Atlas missile. But it took them 40 chances to get the right material, and of which we've now seen something that was built for something become so valuable in everything else. Can I say this to you, 1145 service? You could be sitting on number 39 and everything in you says, just stay down. And Jesus goes, no, today is 40. Today is 40. Rise again. Rise again. And so when we talk about obstacles creating opportunity, it now leads to ruin is not your reality. Ruin is not your reality. When we think about this, I love these success stories. Max Lucado rejected 15 times before somebody took a chance on him. Colonel Sanders, those 11 herbs and spices that brought to us Kentucky Fried Chicken. 1,008 cell phone calls rejected, but on 1,009, somebody said yes. How about this one? Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting before he died. And guess who bought that one painting? His brother. Albert Einstein failed math. Walt Disney was fired because of a lack of creativity. Babe Ruth set the record for the most strikeouts in world history. But what we'd understand about Babe Ruth, he'd be one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. Dr. Seuss was rejected 27 times. J.K. Rowling, you love Harry Potter, but she was on welfare, and Harry Potter was rejected 12 times. And then when you talk about Steven Spielberg, was rejected by the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts twice. Twice he was rejected by the school. Went on to be nominated for 17 Oscars. Now, if you're like me, you love these kind of stories, like Michael Jordan not able to even make his high school basketball team. We love these stories, and we find great motivation, and we plaster these quotes until it's you. You ever thought about that? We love to hear everybody's comeback story, and we believe the best about everybody else until it's you. And you just stay down, but not today, 11:45 service. Not today. Today we shall rise. Point number 4, write this down. We see our victory over failure. It says, for the righteous falls 7 times and rises again. There's a fable about the eagle and the chickens. That is, the eagle had hatched from its egg a long distance from its mother's nest. A farmer discovers this eagle, brings the eaglet back into the farmhouse and places it into the chicken coop. And so the eagle begins to take on the posture and the attitude of the chicken. Pecking corn, flying limited distance. Word got out about this farmer that had this eagle that thought it was a chicken. And so they called an eagle expert, and the eagle expert comes out and takes the eagle and puts it on a fence post and begins to speak these words. You were born to fly. You were called to rise up. But yet the eagle would jump down and continue to peck corn. The eagle expert all of a sudden takes the eagle and goes to the top of the farmhouse and speaks words of declaration over the eagle. You were called to soar new heights, but yet the eagle would jump down and go back into the chicken coop. And the eagle expert said one last thing to the farmer. The farmer was like, listen, the eagle thinks it's a chicken. It's always going to be a chicken. And then the eagle expert said, no, we got to take you out of this environment. We got to take you out of what you have seen every day and allow you to see of what is to become. And so the eagle expert takes the eagle to a mountain with the farmer and begins to hold the eagle. And at that moment, another eagle flies by, giving inspiration. And as the eagle expert saying these words, you were called to new heights, to soar into the unknown. And at that moment, with one defining moment, the eagle, seeing what could be, leaves what used to be and go after the unknown. Can I say this to you? It's coming to church that you see the success stories and the redemptive stories and the comeback stories of people. It's like last night when beautiful CBC families bring up to me 2 women that just got out of prison and just said, if I needed to hear anything, it was this message, and we're here. And so they get around other eagles and they begin to see what could be than what used to be. And sometimes you have to come to this place and realize that all of us have made mistakes. All of us got epic fails and faults, but we have to hear the Father's voice speak over us. You are called to new heights. You are called to new seasons. You are called to a new place. You're called to the next level, but you can't let what currently has happened hold you back. And sometimes you got to get a new perspective. And that's exactly what letter A says to us. Gain a new perspective. Thomas Edison, what a quote this is. I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. Gain a new perspective. So when we accept responsibility in our mistake, we don't blame it on somebody else. We own it. We man up and we woman up and we own it. And when you own it, guess what happens? You examine the reason. What was the reason for the failure? You exploit that. You try to dig into that and go, what caused this to happen? And you learn from it. And you discover a result and you build on it. You're not a failure. That is, failure is an event, not a person. We got to hear that today. But let her be, write this down. You got to grip your known purpose or know your purpose. Grip your purpose. It's supposed to say known purpose. Grip your known purpose. Failure, I love what Zig Ziglar said. Failure doesn't come from falling down. Failure comes from not getting up. Now, I want to just lead us into this moment. My favorite picture that's in my office that I wanted you to see is a picture of Jesus reaching down for the hand of Simon Peter. Now see it from this perspective. Simon Peter sees Jesus walking on the water, and he says to Jesus, if it's you, Lord, call me out to the water. And Jesus would watch Simon Peter walk towards him, but then take his eyes off of him and begin to sink. That is, Simon Peter, from this perspective, looking at Jesus reaching down. But I want to draw your attention to the facial expression of Jesus that I love the most. It's not a face of disgust. It's a face of delight. That you would try to do something, and come on, 11:45, that 11 other dudes in the boat chose not to do. Could we see it that way today? That you tried to do something that 11 other guys said, don't want to do that because I'm going to fail. That's why I wrote in the takeaway statement, I would rather be wet in failure outside the boat than to be dry and called a success in the boat. Now, it led me to write a poem. Would it be okay if I share this with you? I'm not a poet, but I love hip hop, rap music. And I struggle with rhythm and cadence, but I like to write words that rhyme. And I was thinking about you this week, and I thought, you know what? If they're like me, they need to hear the Father's voice louder than their failure. So I wrote something. If it'd be all right, I want to share it with you. The Father says this about you. I'll never give up on you. Grow tired of you, for your past has no claim on you. I put a robe of righteousness on you. I enjoy you, never disgusted with you, fighting your battles for you. Only if you could believe what I believe about you. Numerous are my thoughts towards you. I sing over you. Celebrate every victory with you. Catch every tear that falls from you. I'm here, always here, forever here. I personally chose you. I have completely forgiven you. I fully know you. I fully love you. And you are not a failure. Come on, church. Can we believe this today about ourselves? Come on, can we just clap our hands in faith and believe what Jesus says about us? You're not a failure. Heads up and eyes open. How many of you today would just say, Ed, and you can stay standing. How many of you today would say, Ed, this is exactly what I needed to hear today? Would you just raise your hand today? Come on. My hand is raised. A righteous man. Come on, fellas. Any fellas in the house? A righteous woman. Any ladies in the house? We'll fall, but we'll get back up again. We'll rise again. And if you have not given your life to Jesus Christ Today is the day of salvation. Heads up, eyes open. If you want to give your life to Jesus, He's reaching down to you today with a smile of delight, not a smile of disgust. And He invites you into His family. We pray this prayer in faith, and if you want to give your life to Jesus, say this to Him today. Let's all say this together. Lord Jesus, I'm not perfect, but I believe in You. Save me, change me. I give You my life. And today, if you prayed that prayer in faith, calling on the name of Jesus, we believe that it's the greatest decision that you could ever make. As usual, we always say thank you for listening, but we know that God has given you a message and a word, and we'd love to hear from you. Here's what we understand about our journey as followers of Jesus. Sometimes it's sharing with somebody what God is doing in our heart and life that gives us boldness to take that next step. So send us that email at nextsteps@communitybible.com or visit us online at communitybible.com/nextsteps. If you're in the area, we'd love to have you a part of one of our gatherings. But if you're outside the area, it's our highest encouragement to you to be involved in a Bible-believing church where you can make much of your gifts, talents, and abilities for the glory of Jesus. Till we meet again, much love.